Good evening. My name is Terry Falk. I'm the Assistant Athletic Director at this university for NCAA rules compliance, and I'm here to speak to you this evening about maintaining your academic eligibility, sorting out the mystery, and staying academically eligible to compete in intercollegiate sports. And I apologize for sitting down. Ordinarily, I give this presentation standing up, but this is really the only way I can get my PowerPoint in and have access to it is by sitting down. Now, before we start, I want to congratulate each and every one of you. You do have plenty of things that you've accomplished that you can justifiably be very proud of. You have excelled in your sport to the point where you have been recruited by several Division I institutions. You were accepted to this school and you chose to attend this school. So that raises a question. Is now a good time to rest on your laurels? Well, you probably have some differing answers on that, but I have an answer that is very firm. And that is absolutely not. So I will tell you why I say that, and it's not to crack the whip on any of you. It is because I know you are capable of accomplishing more given a little bit of extra time than you have already accomplished at this point in your life. The admissions office in this university knows that as well. If they had any doubt about that, you would not have been accepted at this school. In fact, we get far more applications at this school than we are able to accept. It becomes a numbers game. And many of those applicants are students who we believe will succeed in college. There just isn't enough room to admit them here. So we wish those students well, and we hope that they are not so discouraged by the admissions process that they give up on college altogether. Rather, they find a school that does have room to accept them, that is academically and socially acceptable to them and a good fit for them, and that they excel there. But right now, you're the more important topic. And I think you would agree with me deep down. It's natural to have some misgivings as you're going into a new chapter in your life. But I think deep down, you would agree with me that you are capable of succeeding at this level. If you did not believe that, you probably never would have applied here, never would have applied to any other school either. So what to expect in the road ahead? College is a new experience for you, and in all likelihood, it's something the likes of which you've never experienced before. Most of you are probably away from home for the first time in your life. You'll be thrown in with several teammates whom you don't really know or haven't even met until very recently. You'll also be thrown in with several different students whom, for those of you living on campus anyway, whom you've never met before. And they will be living in very close quarters to you if you're living in a dormitory on campus. And you'll even have to share a bathroom with some of them. In addition, many of the people you meet here will probably have words for certain items that are pretty much staples in your life that you have not heard before. For example, let's talk about the rubber-soled, soft-soled shoes that you usually wear for academic competitions. And no, I'm not talking about cleats. I'm talking about what I always called growing up sneakers. But if you meet someone from a different part of the country, that person may very well call them tennis shoes or gym shoes. So that's going to be a development for each of you, something you're going to have to learn to live with. The carbonated and sweet-tasting soft drink that many of you are probably quite fond of. You may have heard referred to as soda or pop or both, or even soda pop. or you may have one term that you prefer over the others for it. In addition to all of those terms, you may very well hear these things referred to as Cokes. Now, for me growing up, Coke always referred to a specific brand name of a certain product, soft drink product. But in some parts of the country, Coke has become a sort of generic term for these soft drinks. So you may hear them referred to as Cokes even when they're not the brand name Coke. Another item, and this is probably another staple in your lives, is the food that is made up of bread that is rolled flat and round, covered with sauce, cheese, and an occasional topping. I've always referred to those as pizza. In different parts of the country, they are referred to as pies. And I throw this in only because I was an undergrad at Notre Dame. I heard them referred to there as Zaz, which I'm guessing probably is preferred by a certain geographic subregion of the country, because I don't think Notre Dame students would have made that term up all by themselves for the first time when they arrived on campus. So those are just some differences to be mindful of, and that's not even the most difficult part of this. On top of all of that, most of you will experience greater academic and athletic challenges than you have experienced up to this point in your lives. But there's some good news as well. We're here to help you. And that's why I'm here tonight. As the name student athlete implies, you as a student athlete wear two hats. One is a student. And yes, that's not an atypical picture of what a college class might look like, even though there were a lot of people in there. The other is an athlete. I need to talk to you for a moment about the bargain between a student athlete and the university or college that the student athlete attends. Basically, it's this. Student athlete is going to agree to represent the university or college in intercollegiate athletic competition, usually in one sport, but occasionally you see student athletes play more than one sport. In return for that, the university or college agrees to provide the student athlete, at a minimum, with an opportunity to obtain a baccalaureate or equivalent degree. And sometimes there's much more going to the student athlete than that in this bargain. One of the big things is a lot of you are going to receive athletic scholarships, either in full or in part. Those will provide you with a great deal of financial benefit because it is not cheap to attend school here. Many of your fellow students who are not student athletes will have to borrow the equivalent amount of money to be here that you receive as part of your athletic scholarship. And of course, those students will be paying back those loans over time with interest long after they graduate from here. You, by virtue of an athletic scholarship, will have saved some, if not all, of the expenses that your fellow students will incur in student loans. And this is going to be a benefit that will be annuitized to you for a significant portion of your life after college. Other advantages to being here. One is that you earn a greater lifetime earning capacity on average with a bachelor's degree than without one. On average, that figure is $1 million approximately. And just so that we're clear before people get too excited, I'm not talking about $1 million per year. I'm talking about $1 million over a lifetime, but that's still a decent amount of money. If you receive a bachelor's degree, you are better educated than the average person living in the United States. The overwhelming majority of adults in the United States have either a high school diploma or a high school equivalency diploma. However, less than half of all adults in the United States have a bachelor's degree. Now, that may not interest you at the moment, but I believe before you leave this university, you will value that. You will, I believe most of you will, and you probably should, come to love during your time here, learning just as its own reward. You certainly get a greater appreciation for that. And it is a source of pride, I suppose, to most people with bachelor's degrees, that they have accomplished something that the majority of adults in this country have not accomplished. And going back to the earning capacity, even if you want to, and I would not discourage anybody from pursuing a major in which they're interested, but we all know that not all majors are terribly remunerative, at least at the baccalaureate degree level. But what those degrees will do for you is possibly open the door to a pursuit of a postgraduate degree, which could up the ante quite a bit in terms of your earning possibilities. In addition, and I talked about this before, many student athletes receive full or partial athletic scholarships based on their participation as student athletes. And like I said, this has a tremendous benefit for you over your fellow students who are not athletes, in that many of them are going to have to borrow the difference in student loans. If they do that after they leave here, and for many years after they leave here, they will have to pay back those student loans with interest. That's something that you won't have to do, or if you do have to pay back some student loans, you're going to pay back quite a bit less, as a general rule, than most of your fellow students who are not athletes. Now, the main bylaw that governs academic eligibility going forward is bylaw 14.01.2, and because I quoted it, I'm going to read it, and I apologize for not facing it at the moment. To be eligible to represent an institution in an intercollegiate athletics competition, a student athlete shall be enrolled in at least a minimum full-time program of studies, be in good academic standing, and maintain progress toward a baccalaureate or equivalent degree. Now, there are certain terms in there that could be subject to a number of different meanings. As a general rule, these terms are defined by the individual institutions themselves, sometimes with input from their conferences, and occasionally, in at least one situation, with some input by the NCAA as well. These terms are good academic standing and minimum full-time program of studies. Let's talk first about good academic standing. What does that mean? As we said, it's defined by the institution. It's subject to input by an institution's conference, if applicable, and that is Division I Bylaw 14.01.2.1. I'm not requiring that you memorize these numbers for the bylaws. I don't have them memorized either. I have to go back and check these to make sure that I'm correct. One additional requirement as to good academic standing, and this applies only to baseball players. Baseball player must be in good academic standing as of the fall academic term, the start of the fall academic term, even though baseball's championship season does not begin until the spring academic term. And that can be found at Division I Bylaw 14.01.2.1.1. And just in case we've forgotten who that additional requirement applies to, the guys playing that sport. Let's talk a little bit about a minimum full-time program of studies. It's defined by the particular institution, for the most part. Here it means at least 12 credit hours per semester. We are in a semester system. Now this is very important, and this comes from Division I Bylaw 14.2.1.2. If you drop a course, in order to retain your eligibility, if that course drops you below what is considered a full-time course load here, you would have to add a course that brings you to or above the minimum full-time course load at this school in order to regain your academic eligibility. In that case, you would regain your academic eligibility as soon as the ad became official. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. Most will not affect you right away. If they do affect you at all, it would be later on in your career as a student athlete. One is the final semester or quarter, which obviously as incoming freshmen will not affect you. Basically what that rule is that a student athlete may take less than a full-time course load provided that they are on track to graduate. There's also an exception for the final academic term prior to an experiential learning requirement, such as, for example, student teaching or an internship. And again, that requirement is that you, as long as you are on track to complete all of the academic requirements for your degree, other than the experiential learning requirement, you may take less than a full-time course load in that final term. Again, that doesn't affect you right now since you're incoming freshman. There is an exception for the first week of classes, and that is during the first 5 days of classes. You may participate in practice, but may not compete if you are enrolled in less than a full-time course load. Other exceptions, and again, these don't apply to you, a former student participating in practice on an occasional basis. Another one is practice authorized by the U.S. Olympic Committee or the national governing body for that sport. Now, in order for that exception to apply, there are several requirements that must be met. It's too complicated to go into that for purposes of this discussion here. But I will tell you that if you believe that is an exception which possibly applies to you, you should come to me after I conclude this talk, and we can sit down and talk about that, think it over. Okay, this is Division I Bylaw 14.2.1. Again, it's quoted, so I will read it. To be eligible to practice and organize practice sessions, a student athlete shall be enrolled in a minimum full-time program of studies leading to a baccalaureate or equivalent degree as defined by the regulations of the certifying institution, which basically means the institution you're attending. Now, for competition, the eligibility requirements are a little bit stricter, in theory at least, if not in practice. And this is under Division I Bylaw 14.2.2, and the difference is emphasized in bold. To be eligible for competition, again, I'm reading because I've quoted the bylaw, student athlete shall be enrolled in at least a minimum full-time program of studies leading to a baccalaureate or equivalent degree, which shall not be less than 12 semester or quarter hours. So the difference between eligibility for competition and eligibility for practice is that in eligibility for practice, the NCAA defers entirely to the institution in terms of what is considered a minimum full-time program of studies. In terms of eligibility for competition, the NCAA has elected to establish a mandatory minimum of credit hours necessary for eligibility for competition. Now, as a practical matter here, I've already told you that the minimum to be considered a full-time student at this school is 12 credit hours per semester. So there isn't any real difference between our rules and the NCAA rules as applied to competition. However, there are a number of schools in the country as to which those rules are different, and that's why I bring this up. That's why it becomes something that has to be looked at. I mean, if I were to take a job at one of these other institutions, I would have to know that, and I would have to be looking at how many courses these student athletes are taking. Talk a little bit about progress toward degree requirements. In order to maintain eligibility during your enrollment as a student athlete, you must meet the requirements for progress toward a baccalaureate degree or equivalency at the institution you represent in athletics competition. Those requirements are to be determined by the regulations of that institution, subject to any legislation of any conference of which your institution is a member, and also subject to controlling NCAA legislation. That is found in Division I Bylaw 14.4.1. Other progress toward degree requirements. You must satisfactorily complete each of the following requirements. And again, these are set forth in a particular bylaw. Prior to the start of your second year of your collegiate enrollment, you must complete a minimum of 24 semester hours or 36 quarter hours, depending on which system your school is at. Since the beginning of the previous fall term, or since the beginning of the institution's previous 2 semesters or 3 quarters, you must have completed 18 semester hours or 27 quarter hours of academic credit. Note that in this particular case, any credit earned during summer school does not count toward that total. And you must complete 6 semester or 6 quarter hours of academic credit during the preceding regular academic term during which you were enrolled full-time at any academic institution. And these are requirements that you, in other words, you must pass these courses and have a grade sufficient to earn the credit for these courses. This is all found in Division I Bylaw 14.4.3.1. Now, what happens if you fail to meet any of these requirements? Now, keep in mind that all of those requirements have to be met. You have to meet all 3 in order to be eligible. If you meet 2 of them, don't meet 1, you're not eligible. But that doesn't mean you're permanently ineligible for competition. You can rehabilitate yourself by meeting those requirements as of the following academic term, at which point you would be reinstated eligibility for that academic term. Okay, another requirement toward fulfillment of your progress toward degree requirements is found at Division I Bylaw 14.4.3.2. And this says that you shall have successfully completed at least 40% of the course requirements in your specific degree program entering your 3rd year of collegiate enrollment. That percentage goes up to 60% entering your 4th year of collegiate enrollment and 80% entering your 5th year of collegiate enrollment. Note that these are minimum requirements. You can have more than that, and you're fine if you have more than that, but this is the minimum amount you need. Now, one exception does lie toward a 5-year program. If you are enrolled in what is considered a 5-year program, either by this institution's official catalog, or it will require a minimum of 150 semester hours or 225 quarter hours of credits in order to graduate, then those percentages change. Entering your 3rd year, the requirement is that you have to have completed 33% of the requirements. Entering your 4th year, you are required to have completed at least 50% of the requirements toward your degree. And entering your 5th year, you are required to have completed at least 67% of the requirements toward your degree. That's bylaw 14.4.3.2.1. Now, if this confuses you, I've developed a rule of thumb that at least works for myself, and hopefully it'll work for you as well. In any event, the NCAA will give you 1 extra year to complete the requirements for a baccalaureate degree, and I believe this is in recognition of the fact that as student athletes, you have certain demands on your time that your fellow students who are not student athletes do not have. And for that reason, they are permitting you extra time. So, if the program you're enrolled in is one where the institution would expect you to graduate in 4 years, the NCAA will give you 5 years. If the program is one where the institution would expect you to graduate in 5 years, the NCAA will give you 6 years. Now, beyond that, the percentage of the degree requirements needed to be completed at the beginning of each academic year, beginning with your 3rd academic year, must be at least equal to the minimum requirements percentage of requirements, I should say, that you would need to have completed in order to stay on track to graduate within the time permitted by the NCAA for your academic program. So that's why the difference is between a 4-year program and a 5-year program in terms of percentages. And if you do the math, you will see that they add up to what I'm talking about. Now, there are minimum GPA requirements, and those are set forth in Division I Bylaw 14.4.3.3. At the beginning of your 2nd year, your GPA must be a minimum of 90% of the minimum cumulative GPA required for graduation at your institution. At the beginning of your 3rd year, your minimum GPA must be at least 95% of that minimum GPA required by your institution for graduation. Cumulative GPA again. And at the beginning of your 4th year or later, your minimum GPA must be at least 100% of the minimum GPA required by your institution for graduation. Cumulative GPA required by your institution for graduation. All these are based on a 4.0 scale, although that really is sort of an extraneous consideration, but it is in the bylaw, so I did think I should mention that. Now, there are certain circumstances under which you may be able to obtain a waiver of the progress toward degree and or minimum GPA requirements. One is that if you had a medical issue that required your absence from campus. That's set forth in Division I Bylaw 14.4.3.7 subparagraph A. Another one is if you were competing on an international basis. That would, again, in all likelihood, entail an absence from campus. That's bylaw 14.4.3.7, subparagraph B. If you're in training for the Olympic Games, you may be able to obtain a waiver for these requirements. It's Division I bylaw 14.4.3.8. If you have an education impacting disability, you may be able to obtain a waiver of these requirements. That's bylaw 14.4.3.9. And finally, there are additional progress toward degree waivers available under bylaw 14.4.3.10. The standard here is that it must be based on objective evidence, and again I'm reading, so I apologize for having my head turned, that demonstrates circumstances that warrant the waiver of the normal application of those regulations. Some additional requirements in order for you to maintain good academic standing. You may not engage in any academic dishonesty. Some examples here are: you may not commit academic fraud. For example, if you were to pass off work that was done by someone else as your own, that would be an example of academic fraud. You also may not plagiarize, which is, for example, copying a scholarly treatise verbatim without citing your appropriate source. If you cite your appropriate source, you can do that. That's fine. But if you copy it and do not cite it, then you're plagiarizing. Also, you may not accept any academic benefit from any university official if the benefit is not available to other students who are not athletes. And this is an area where you can actually help us. If you notice anything of this sort, please feel free to report it to us. It may be an innocent violation, but it's certainly something we need to nip in the bud immediately. So by all means, I have an open door policy. If you observe anything of this nature, please feel free to come to me. So, are you confused yet? I think you probably are, because you haven't really given any of this information a whole lot of thought until now. As I said earlier, we are here to help. We have a vested interest in your success as a student athlete. We consider you, and not only you, but all students enrolled here, to be a member of this institution's family, extended family. So we do want you to succeed. We have academic advisors available to help you succeed. We have all sorts of people in place to help you succeed.